Good evening and welcome. It is a pleasure and an honor to welcome Termaine Hicks to the Mountain and to the School of Theology as the keynote speaker for the EFM 2023 Summer Conference and as the Advanced Degrees Program lecturer, an event made possible by the Samuel Marshall Beattie Lecture Fund. It is well known in the Episcopal Church and even beyond that Education for Ministry, EFM, changes lives. I suspect that most of the folks who are here for the conference agree with that sentiment. I suspect also that some of you may have your own stories of transformation to tell. But few, if any, will have a story as dramatic as Termaine Hicks. As you may know, Mr. Hicks completed EFM while incarcerated for a crime that he did not commit. Following a 19-year fight for justice and against extraordinary odds, Mr. Hicks was exonerated and released from prison in December 2020, an event that made national news. During his 19 years in prison, Mr. Hicks noticed how inmates entering the penitentiary were getting younger and younger. Most of those young people had made a single mistake, often as the result of bullying, and their entire lives were disrupted. Wanting to reach young people before fateful decisions were made, Mr. Hicks began to produce videos on gun violence and bullying. In 2022, after his release from prison, Mr. Hicks founded the nonprofit Selfless Thinking Expresses Potential That Uplifts People, also known by its acronym STEP UP, which supports at-risk youth with the intention of positively influencing young people before an encounter with law enforcement. Today, Step Up produces and promotes educational videos and also offers motivational speaking and training in schools, teaching positive decision-making, how to recognize bullying, and how to communicate with peers who carry guns, sell drugs, or drink and drive. Training also emphasizes the importance of physical fitness and a healthy lifestyle, and it empowers youth to use their voice to prevent bullying and violence. Through all the years of struggle, through trial, incarceration, through the long fight for justice, and now through the transformation of what happened to him into resources for at-risk youth, Mr. Hicks has never lost faith. His story is an extraordinary testimony to the power of faith to overcome bitterness and despair. His commitment to helping others after the injustice that he has is truly inspirational. In an article published earlier this year by the School of Theology, Mr. Hicks was quoted as saying this: "God saw fit to keep me alive. EFM gave me the skills, and Step Up is my gift back to the world." This evening, Mr. Hicks's lecture is titled, "God Kept You Around for a Reason. You Need to Figure Out Why." Please join me in welcoming Mr. Termaine Hicks.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Wow. I don't even know why I'm here because Father did a fantastic job, man. I mean, sheesh. That's everything I wrote right here, man. All right. So, good evening, man. I love good jokes. I love short stories, funny stories, and this was one of the things out of many that gave me hope, kept me happy, kept me motivated and moving through. So as I began to write this speech, I said, I got to find a good joke, hopefully. And as you know, they're either a hit or a miss. I believe this to be a really good one. If not, it'll be a little awkward moving forward, but we'll manage. All right. So this is entitled "The Smartest People in the World," right? A doctor, a lawyer, a little boy, and a priest were out for a Sunday afternoon flight on a small private plane. Suddenly, the plane developed engine trouble. In spite of the best efforts of the pilot, the plane started to go down. Finally, the pilot grabbed the parachute, yelled to the passengers that they had better jump, and then he just bailed out. Unfortunately, there were only 3 parachutes remaining. The doctor grabbed one and said, "I'm a doctor. I save lives, so I must live." And he jumped out. The lawyer then said, "I'm a lawyer, and lawyers are the smartest people in the world. I deserve to live." He also grabbed the parachute and jumped. The priest looked at the little boy and said, "My son, I lived a long and full life. You are young and have your whole life ahead of you. Take the last parachute and live in peace." The little boy handed the parachute back to the priest and said, "Not to worry, Father. The smartest man in the world just took off with my backpack." I promise you guys, my attorneys were smarter than that guy, all right? I promise you that. All right. Good evening. It is an honor and great pleasure to be speaking before you all tonight. It really is. Thank you to Sarah Lumbaugh, Karen Meredith, and all those who made this evening possible. I also would like to thank everyone who came out to hear me speak, you guys, this evening. And thank you to everyone who was watching live. God bless you all. So you want to hear me talk about how I navigated 2 decades of a wrongful conviction, EFM, and what I've been doing these past 2.5 years since my exoneration. Well, the good news is I survived EFM, right? Tell you. Hey. That was a rough 4 years to navigate. In the midst of everything else that I was going through, trust me, that was rough. Y'all understand, right? But I did it one day at a time, all 6,943 of them, one day at a time. I was asked to give this speech a title, and I never thought about giving any of my talks a title. I just talk about my experience and how I got through it. And initially, when I was asked, I actually came up with that. Hard times don't last. I was listening to a song. It was a new rap song, very inspirational, motivational. And that was one of the lines he said in there, and it struck with me. Because the truth of the matter is, hard times don't last. But as I began to write, I gave it some more thought, and then I immediately emailed Sarah. And I said, "Sarah, is it too late to change the title?" And when I came from the bathroom just now and I was looking, I said, it must have been too late. But it wasn't, because when Father was giving his address, he said the correct title. And so I decided on God kept you around for a reason. You need to figure out why, God kept you out for a reason, and you need to figure out why. 22 years ago in my neighborhood in South Philadelphia, I heard the screams of a woman who was being raped. All right? I ran to the alley where her voice was coming from. As I arrived, I reached for my cell phone to call 911. At that same moment, the police arrived on the scene and mistook me for the assailant. Black guy, woman on the ground. They shot me 3 times in my back before my hand even came out of my pocket. They didn't ask any questions. They didn't try to inquire and investigate or nothing. Boom, boom, boom. What happened next happened far too often. The police lied. They planted the gun on me and said I pointed it at them, but that gun actually belonged to a Philadelphia police officer, man. And it was not reported stolen until the day after I was shot. Based on their false testimony, I was convicted and sentenced to 12.5 to 25 years in prison. I served nearly 19.5 years of that sentence because I refused to accept responsibility for a crime I did not commit just to make parole. I couldn't do it. I mean, I thought about it. I wanted out. I wanted to get out. That would have been too big of a burden for me to bear. To walk around as a convicted rapist, register as a sex offender, and try to get gainful employment knowing I was innocent. My goodness, ain't no way. I know me well too well. I know me. And I just know that I couldn't have been this man that I am today had I went that route. I believe I'm a pretty strong guy, but to try and function under those circumstances, it wasn't no way. There are many different ways one could look at what happened to me and be outraged, appalled, angry, upset, and be justified as such. I, however, the one who actually experienced it, the one who was laying on the ground, bleeding out, feeling his life slips away from, and look at it from a different perspective. You see, today could easily have been the 22nd anniversary of my death. Today I could have been a memory to my family, a legend to my grandson. My son was 5 when this happened to me. Or today could have been my 22nd year confined to a wheelchair because one of those bullets just missed my spine. In fact, there's still fragments lodged in my spine right now. Or had I taken a deal of 30 to 60 years sentence that the DA's office offered me, an innocent man, I'd still be sitting in prison right now because I pled guilty. And guilty verdicts are a little bit tougher to overturn. Think about that. My goodness. Or I could still be sitting in the penitentiary had not the New York Innocence Project taken on my case and fought like hell to prove my innocence. Life will come at you. It will come at you fast. It will come at you hard and unexpectedly in the form of an accident or deliberately by the hands of another human being. What are you going to do? And how are you going to assess what happened to you, right? I had a conversation with the nurse whose job it was to bathe me after my surgery. Well, it really wasn't a conversation. It was me inquiring. You see, I didn't even know how many times I was shot. And when I asked her if she knew how many times I had been, she set the sponge down, looked me square in my eyes and said, "Baby, I don't know, but you have about 7 bullet holes in your body. God kept you around for a reason. You need to figure out why." I got a chill over my entire body and I started to cry. I was like, damn, they shot me 7 times. She then pointed to every bullet hole, lifting up my arms and showing me exactly where every bullet had entered and exited my body, because I didn't have a clue. I wasn't even facing them. One of the bullets made 3 wounds. It entered the back of my right arm, exited the inside of my right arm, and entered my right lateral chest wall where it collapsed my lung. That hand was in my pocket when I was shot, not extending, pointing a gun at a cop. God kept you around for a reason. You need to figure out why. A year after I was convicted and my case was on appeal, I was looking for something to do to bide the time. I knew I was coming up from under this. I mean, the police concocted this incredible story of how they shot me in my chest 3 times after I lunged at them with a gun in my hand. And here I am with bullet holes in my back. None in my chest. God kept me around for a reason, right? Surely it wasn't to wither away in the penitentiary. So I took a quick inventory of what it was I liked to do, and writing was the one thing that kept resurfacing. As a kid growing up in the 80s, I fell in love with hip hop and aspired to be a rapper. I mean, everyone I knew did. I used to write raps daily, but as I grew, other things began to interest me, and the time it took to muse, to jot down lyrics was no longer there, and I just stopped writing altogether. In 2002, I wrote a pretty cool play entitled The Christmas Conspiracy. In short, Santa Claus was this Russian drug lord named Nikolai Klosky. Oh yeah, this gets good. This gets real good. Santa Claus was this Russian drug lord named Nikolai Klosky who created the whole Christmas season to smuggle drugs across the world. Yeah, Frosty, the snowman, was actually his hitman named Iceman. Right? And my man Rudolph. Well, poor Rudolph was the transporter who was caught smuggling the drugs during a blizzard because his nose kept flashing and alerted the authorities to his whereabouts. Rudolph got arrested and snitched on the whole operation. I'm sorry, Rudolph. Needless to say, the men in the penitentiary loved it, and that officially put me on the map in the penitentiary as a talented playwright. So this creative writing class that I was in, this is when I was trying to find my way, and I seen that they had a creative writing class. One of the counselors there was doing this. And I signed up for it, and it was about 20 of us in this classroom. And he said, we're gonna do a Christmas production. And when he said that we was gonna do Silent Night, 98% of the class got up and left. They just walked right out. We're not doing no Silent Night. And I looked around, it was me and two other guys left. And I said, Mr. Milliken, listen, man. I said, I can write a play, but it won't be no traditional Christmas play. And he had already booked the venue. We had about 3 weeks. So I said, I could put something together, hence the Christmas Conspiracy. And he was so thankful for me, man. He was, I saved him, right? And the men loved it. I wasn't completely locked in as a writer at this point. I was focused on getting my wrongful conviction overturned. Nothing mattered but my appeal. But that appeal process is long. It's a hurry up to wait in this country. Sometimes, you know, it's months, years before a ruling comes down. And in my case, it was denial after denial. 2 decades of denials. Dozens of judges looking over my case and still denial. God kept me around for a reason. So in between my denials and to maintain my sanity, I dove into creative writing. Writing became my therapy. It gave me the ability to create an alternative environment from the bizarre one I found myself as a convicted rapist who survived being shot in the back unarmed and unjustifiably by a Philadelphia police officer. Over the years of my wrongful conviction, I wrote and produced dozens of stage plays, among other creative works, poetry, short stories, essays. In 2007, I transferred to Greater Ford State Penitentiary to be closer to my family in Philadelphia, especially my son. I was at Somerset, a state correctional institution outside of Pittsburgh, approximately 6 hours from Philly. They do this by design. The men from the eastern part of the state in Pennsylvania and all across this country, they will send them to the furthest part of the state to discourage visits, to break up the family. It's just cruel and unusual punch. It's bad. I was 6 hours from Philly, so I did not see my son for the first 7 years of my wrongful conviction. That was tough. That was tough. In lieu of not seeing him physically, I wrote him a letter every single week for 13 years. And I called as often as I could. Even after I transferred closer, Greater Ford was 45 minutes from Philly versus 6 hours where I was at. So I was seeing everybody all the time. But I wrote him a letter. Even after he was coming up there, I was still writing him these letters to let him know, I love you, I'm around, I'm your father, I didn't leave you. That was it. And let me say this, for a very long time, I was in denial about what had happened to me. It was hard for me to accept that I was actually shot. There's no mirrors in the penitentiary in Pennsylvania, you know? So you don't really see yourself. You see reflections on like stainless steel or whatever. And so, now that I'm free and I'm home and I have this life-size mirror in my bathroom, it's crazy. But there's moments when I don't even see the bullet wounds because I'm so used to not looking at my reflection, at myself. that when I do look at them, I say to myself, damn, I have 72 staples here. You know, it cut me open, man. It was hard for me to accept that I was actually shot, convicted, and sitting in the penitentiary for something that I didn't do, let alone survived it all. It was the twilight zone. I mean, I'm watching my son grow up before my eyes through visits, right? I'm watching him. But when he turned 18 and was able to visit me on his own without being accompanied by an adult, when he walked through that visiting room door as a young man, it really hit me hard, man. I cried because this shit happened, cuz it happened to me. I've been locked away all those years. I lost so many years, man. My son, my mom, and my siblings, his aunts and uncles, they was bringing him up as a kid. We doing push-ups in the visiting room, having conversations. We talk. He's a kid. No sooner than he turned 18, he said, I'm going to see my dad. And I was happy. I wanted to see him, just me and him, just talking. I had no idea that I was going to respond the way that I did when he walked through that door by his damn self as a man. My goodness. I lost so many years. That was a joyous day, but a tough one. But it was here at Greatersford where I was introduced to EFM in the fall of 2008. And I met Jenny, our facilitator, who had just taken over for Dennis Warner, who had recently passed away. Thankfully, by this time, 7 years into my sentence, I was already an avid Bible reader, deeply immersed in my spirituality, and had a sound understanding of my relationship with my Creator. So when I was invited to sit in on one of EFM's classes to see if I'd be interested in a theological education, I thought, why not? I was already in full pursuit of my purpose. God kept me around for a reason, and I needed to find out why. And theology felt like the next natural step to take this journey, the right transition. Aaron Wheeler, the fellow prisoner who invited me to sit in on my very first EFM class, who was serving a life sentence, said, man, just a heads up, this isn't your typical Bible study class. I really didn't think much of it until Jenny, the facilitator, said the exact same thing once I was introduced to the class of about 15 men, all of whom I already knew. Now I'm thinking to myself, if this isn't a Bible study, then what is it? EFM is an intense theological study that will no doubt first challenge your belief in all of the biblical, historical stories you've been told, read, or even watched on television as a child into adulthood, and essentially flip that all upside down. It introduced you to the concept with no lead up that the stories in the Bible are a myth or a legend. I'm like, excuse me? Wait a minute. A myth is a widely held but false belief or idea, right? And a legend, a historical but unauthenticated story. I'm like, what is this nonsense? What are y'all talking about? The word of God said it happened, so it happened. That was all I needed. It took some getting used to hearing the Bible being referenced as a book full of false beliefs and unauthenticated stories. You definitely need a solid foundation before even considering a comprehensive theological teaching to why you believe what you do. Most guys didn't last long because of this critical theological point of view. When I started year one, the Hebrew Bible, by far the most challenging of them all for me, especially those side textbooks. Yeah. Huh? Y'all understand. It was 6 of us when I started. By the end of my first year, and on to my graduation, the completion of my 4th year, it was just me. Holding it down, Huh, Jenny? Yeah. Reading all that boring materials. Yeah. Yeah. Doing all of the homework and answering all of the challenging questions from years 2 through 4 students, and Jenny, our facilitator. I enjoyed it all, embraced it all because God kept me around for a reason, and I was determined to figure out why. By the time of my graduation, I had written and produced about 8 plays. And since my graduation ceremony was to last about 2 hours, and I was the last man standing, I asked if I could perform a play. Jenny said absolutely. She heard all about my plays, and now she would have an opportunity to see one. I named this play Soldiers in the Army of the Lord because of EFM's curriculum, because EFM's curriculum was definitely a battle. I casted just about everyone who was participating in EFM, even some of the new recruits. I played the lead, whose name was Sergeant Hollis Roller, but was affectionately called Sergeant Holy Roller by his battalion. The no-nonsense, Bible-thumping drill sergeant whose dialogue consisted of biblical myths, legends, and scriptures. All EFM, man. His duty was to encourage and equip them with the necessary tools needed to be effective soldiers in the army of the Lord. Between your life experiences and EFM training, if you're open to it, you will have all the necessary tools needed to be a successful minister of God's word. At the time, I was attending EFM, writing plays, and working in the chaplaincy department at the prison. I noticed how the prison population was getting younger and younger. These young men were coming through with long sentences, life sentences, without the possibility of parole. After talking to a few of them, I learned that almost all of them had gotten into a fight because someone scuffed their sneakers, said something to their girlfriend, or trash talked on a ball court. That they had gotten into a fight, lost that fight, then went and got a gun and shot and killed the guy. Now they're in the penitentiary with a life sentence. And a life sentence in Pennsylvania means you're never getting out. It means your natural life. A fight you lost that could have been prevented if cooler heads would have prevailed has cost you the freedom for the rest of your life. These kids were 18, 19, 20 years old. Some of them younger than my son. Hadn't begun to live, and now they would live out the rest of their lives in a cage. That messed with me. I empathize with their situation because it could have been prevented. Just walk away, man. I also noticed how they gravitated towards my plays. They loved watching them. The jail would air them on the prison station. Guys would watch my plays all day long. Then they would stop me wherever I was throughout the penitentiary and recite dialogue from their favorite character that I created. And sometimes I just be like, what are y'all saying? What are you talking about? Like, nah, this was with the guys. I was like, okay. When word got out, I was working on another play. I was never short of actors. I'm telling you. These men were lining up to be in the next production for sure. So in 2008, I shifted my playwriting skills to writing short educational scripts to teach critical thinking and conflict resolution to help curb gun violence and bullying within schools and neighborhoods to hopefully prevent future kids from coming through the penitentiary or from killing themselves. I entitled this collection of scripts, Step Up, an acronym which stands for Selfless Thinking Expresses Potential That Uplifts People. I walked the viewers through the worst possible outcome to the most feasible one through a series of reenactments of how to be that friend to talk to their peers that may be carrying a gun or bullying someone. I wrote several of these step-up scripts with hopes of having them produced while still incarcerated. I didn't want to see no more of these kids come through. This was in 2008. However, I realized that was a tall task. Finally, and I mean finally, I was exonerated. Talk about a whirlwind of events, right? I went from sitting in a cell, binge watching Ozark in the midst of yes. My man Marty, yeah. That was my guy. I went from sitting in a cell, binge watching Ozark in the midst of a pandemic to a phone call from my Innocence Project attorney, Vanessa Pockins, telling me that the judge had just vacated my sentence, exonerated me, and even apologized for the wrong done to me for 2 decades. Wow. Imagine that. And that she was on the phone with the Department of Corrections working on my immediate release. My head was spinning, taking all of this in. And then the guard tapped on the door as I was still on the phone with my attorney and said, as soon as you're done on the phone, you're going home. Just like that. And Peter Newfield, one of the founders of the New York Innocence Project, said, hang the phone up. We see you on outside. I just hung that phone up. Just like that, man, it was over. Just like that, you pray for it, you anticipate it, you think you know how you're going to react, and I had no idea. It was this older guy who's still incarcerated. He has a life sentence. His name is Charles Coley. He worked in the chapel with me. And certain men, I shared my plight with, my story with. You just don't talk about your case inside the penitentiary, because that can get you in some trouble. But certain men I talked to, and Charles Coley was one of them. He had been in jail. He's been in jail longer than I've been alive. And most of the men that I confided in, my father passed away when I was 13. I spent 2 decades in prison under a wrongful conviction. I know these men better than I know my own father. You hear me? And I used to talk to these men, man, and share my case with them, show them some of my legal work and paper and materials, stuff that you just don't do. And Charles told me, he said, listen, when that day come, your head's gonna be spinning. So you're going home. You just gotta be patient. I was home 9 months before I had a grasp of what it was I wanted to do. I was taking everything in, reuniting with my family, getting reacclimated with society, just taking my time. And once I settled, I began to look over those step-up scripts I wrote a decade ago. God had kept me around for a reason, and I figured out the why. You hear me? It was step up. Even some of the men I was incarcerated with would call and ask what I plan on doing with all those scripts, that them step-up scripts that I had written. Violence was prevalent. They knew it. They was watching it on the news. And now I was seeing it in real time. And I was sad, very discouraged. Something has to be done. So I turned Step Up into a 501c3 nonprofit and produced Step Up to help curb gun violence. And then 6 months later, Step Up and Say No to Bullies. And we started going into schools around the country, teaching critical thinking and conflict resolution. And they get it. They get it. They really get it. I'm just reintroducing simple things, man. Social media, I'm learning, social media messed society up. It really messed, especially these kids, man. They don't know how to interact with one another. And I'm just reintroducing some simple things, man. Don't text and say hello when he's sitting there. Go over to him and say hello. What? When you ain't got Wi-Fi, he ain't get the hello. Right? What in the world? Just go say hello. Our goal is to have the Step Up films in every classroom across the country. Step Up has a YouTube channel. It's at Step Up 2008. And you can actually view the short films that we have on the YouTube channel. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I don't know the handles. I have to look at it because I don't know. That's too many of them. It's a lot. I'll be forgetting my own handles sometimes. 3 months after my exoneration, I was asked by Jenny, the facilitator of EFM from Greater Fort Prison, if I would consider becoming a board member of the Dennis H. Warner Memorial Foundation, which is now named EAF, an acronym which stands for Educational Assistance for the Incarcerated and Freed. Dennis, who I never had the chance of meeting but heard great things about from the men who took the EFM theological course before me, his beautiful wife, Helen, and daughter, Alicia, friends and colleagues, Chris, Bud, Alan, Kitty, and Jenny, who carried the mantle. I believe that's everyone. But they created this foundation to award scholarships to family members of released inmates from the state correctional institution at Greater Fort, which is now Phoenix, for EFM members to further their education upon their release, or to assist a family's members' educational goals, to honor this great man who was passionate about the men locked away from society. Now, how incredible is that, right? I was honored to be considered for such a role. I believe I've been a board member now for nearly 2 years, right? And we have awarded a few scholarships to family members to help further their educational goals. Just as for a long period of time, I couldn't believe what had happened to me really had happened. There are times when I still can't believe it's all over, that I'm actually home. I have some moments. I wake up and it's not a dream. It's really over, and I'm really home. Aside from Step Up and EAF, I'm also a board member for the New York Innocence Project Exoneration Advisory Council, and may become a board member for the Pennsylvania Innocence Project as well. And I speak all around the country about gun violence, police misconduct, and wrongful convictions. I'm wrapping up now, so thank you again for having me. This was nice. You guys were great. And I will pass it back over to the chaplain.
Mr. Hicks has some time to take some questions, and then there is a reception that follows out in the lobby there. So if you don't get your questions asked here, there's a chance to meet Termaine out in the lobby. But we have time for some Q&A, and I have someone younger and more spry than I to run up and down the steps.
Maybe not spry, but question.
How did your lawyers finally secure your exoneration after 19 years?
That's a great question. So the New York Innocence Project typically focuses on DNA to help exonerate. In this case, there wasn't any DNA because the guy that assaulted the woman ran off real quick. And there was DNA, but not enough to exonerate me. It was inconclusive. So what they did was they said, well, let's look at the trajectory of these bullets. Let's go the forensic route, you know? So they hired world-renowned forensic pathologist, Dr. Michael Beattie out of New York. And he looked at medical records. He looked at the clothes that I was wearing that night, and more importantly, he looked at my body. And he concluded, them cops is lying. That man was not facing them. All of the bullets entered his back. And that started it right there. Thank you for your question.
I probably don't need that. Could you tell us about?
We do have some folks online, so if you're willing.
Could you tell us about your forgiveness process?
It's a great question. I don't think it was much of a process. For me, I don't even think I gave my time to be angry or to be bitter, because when I came out of, so when I woke up, I was alive. I was handcuffed to a bed right after surgery. So I really didn't know what happened. My mom came to the hospital to see me. Well, let me back up. Let me, we talking about the police now and my forgiveness and misconduct. When I came to, I was handcuffed to a bed with a chest tube in my mouth, and I tried to pull it out because I didn't know what the hell was going on. Because this hand was handcuffed, so I tried my other hand. The doctor grabbed it. Said no, he pulled it out. It was two men standing in the corner, detectives, and they had asked me if they wanted me to sign the statement that I had wrote. I said, huh? I said, I want a lawyer. So this is America. So the fact that I woke up in the hospital and alive, I knew how serious it was. I understood the gravity of the situation. It's me against them. 20 police officers testified against me. Yes. So I was in fight mode. I was in survival mode. I was like, I got to prove my innocence. It was one day at trial, 2 days. The cop that shot me was on the stand for a period of 2 days. And this man told about 9 different stories on the stand. And that was by far the most difficult one, because first and foremost, I was looking at my attorneys like, who are they talking about? Like, they can't possibly be talking about me. The way that they were describing everything that I was supposed to have done. And I cried. I wanted to jump up on that stand and do something terrible to that guy. But everything within me just held me back and said, nah, stay calm. And then when the truth started coming out, even before I was convicted, it was a surveillance tape that captured part of this crime happening. The Commonwealth, the district attorney's office, and the police, they suppressed it, meaning they withheld it from my attorneys, right? So I was shot in my back. It's a surveillance tape. The jury never got the chance to see the tape. So my thinking is, I just got to get back in court to make this happen, man. I did not know it was going to take 2 decades. I don't think nobody would thought it would took 2 decades. So through that process of me, finding my way, trying to figure out the reason why I'm alive, why I've gone through this, I just chose to be happy. I chose not to linger on bitterness and resentment and anger and hate, because those negative words will kill you quicker than a bullet. I survived. I took their best shot. Literally, right? I'm not paralyzed. I don't have any physical, ailments. There's fragments are still in me. But I'm just as young and spry and agile as brother with the mic. There you go. I hope I answered your question. I chose life. I chose God.
How do you help your son who used to visit you to, to forgive, to understand, and to go on with his life without carrying any kind of baggages of bitterness?
You lead by an example. I only have one child, one son. I have one grandson, and I have a daughter-in-law, daughter-in-law. Excuse me. Kayla. My grandson's name is Cameron. And I did it by example. You don't want your kids to see the worst in you, right? We are their first example of what is out there in the world. When he was 18, we never had a conversation about what happened to me. He heard bits and pieces of it over the years, But when he was 18 on that first visit, and we talked about it, and I broke down everything to him. I told him everything. He was a young man now. You know, you can handle this. He was saddened by it. He cried. He was upset. He was angry. And I told him that all these emotions that you're experiencing now is perfectly fine. It's perfectly normal. But don't hold on to that shit. Get it out. I'm all right. Look at me. I'm fine. Let's do some push-ups now.
Hi, I'm a counselor, a high school counselor in Brunswick, Georgia, where Ahmaud Arbery was from.
Good.
How far in advance do you have to be booked? Come speak.
So our website, you go on there and just, you been on it?
I was looking at the pricing.
I mean,
Is there a long,
no, I don't know. I don't handle that. They typically.
But when I say I was here and heard you.
The plug is swiney. EFM. Yeah.
And I'm not even a part of it. My father was an Episcopal minister, so was my grandfather.
No.
I graduated from Sewanee.
But
You would not believe how busy being a high school counselor these days.
I can imagine. I've been to a couple of them.
Cell phones are the devil.
Yes, but as far as booking, I don't.
When
Reach
I
out.
become your best friend at the reception.
Reach out, absolutely.
I wonder, on the day that you were released, how did it feel? You had built community, right, in the penitentiary. How did it feel to take leave of that community, right? Like, you're eager to step into your family, but you're also, I would imagine, leaving a family.
Wow.
And how was that for you?
So that's a great question. The pandemic had stopped everything out here in society as well as in the penitentiary. We locked down. The only time you really moving is going to medical, or you getting a legal call. And it was, things had sped up for me. They slowed down, but they sped up as far as the legal process goes. So the guys knew that I was in heavy conversation with my attorneys about my imminent release. I was having court dates pretty regular. I wasn't going to court. They was doing it on Zoom because of the pandemic. But the day that I was released, unbeknownst to me, and quite frankly, I was actually exonerated 2 hours prior before I found out. I found out at 1:05, I was exonerated. I believe it was 3 hours, 10:08. So when I went to go talk to my attorneys and I came back on the block was locked down, and most of the men were standing at their doors. Like, man, what happened? What's going on? I said, I'm going home. And they shouted and yelled and screamed and banged on the doors. They were so happy and elated for me, man. Chief. My guy, Chief, man. Yeah, man. And I'm in correspondence with, no imagination, about 450 men. They email me, they call me, they write me. I was on the phone just today. One of my friends is up for parole, I was a bit different because a small pocket knew, but the day that I was exonerated, everyone knew. I was on a powerlifting team with a lot of guys. They had no idea. I broke records lifting weights, These men, they writing me now like, how the hell did you do that? you know? What's your secret? What in the world? Like, you know, they just couldn't believe it, man. And part of my therapy is actually staying in contact with the men that are still incarcerated. You know, that's a balance for me. You know, again, I was around men who've been incarcerated longer than I've been alive, and I'm 48 now. I lived a whole life before I went to jail, man. These guys been there, and you know, I used to talk, and it was tough for me. It was. I'm not going to sugarcoat this at all. It was hard, but I used to look at these men who's been in jail. It was this one guy. His name is Joe Legan. Man been in jail 7 decades. If you Google his name, he's the oldest serving inmate in this country, and I believe in the world. He did 73 years. Martin Luther King Jr. was alive when this man went to jail. He was a juvenile. This is what this country does. He was 15 years old. He was released a year after me at 85. I'm looking at these men, most of them maintained their sanity, they maintained their dignity, they did not waver. That encouraged me. It encouraged me. It keeps me encouraged to this day. I'm still a part of that community. The chaplain, I worked in the chaplaincy department for 13 years prior to my exoneration. I eat dinners with the chaplains now. I love, you know, all of the Protestant chaplains, the Muslim chaplain, the Jewish chaplain, the Catholic chaplain, the Buddhist chaplain, the Indian high priest chaplain. You know, there was an atheist chaplain. You know, I talk with him too, man. I mean, so that was my community, man. That is what made me who I am today. It is what, you know, got me through. So I would be a fool to sever that. It's a lifeline.
My question to you is, did the guys who gave false testimony to put you away ever have to pay with their own lives?
The short answer is this. Most of them are still police officers. It's what they do. I mean, it's the biggest and strongest, most corrupt union, gang in this country, right? I would like to see every last one of them do 6,943 days at a minimum. I'm just curious to see what they will come out as, right? They're still police officers. When I was exonerated, so when they shot me, as a typical police procedure, their service weapons are taken and they get interviewed, investigated, and by the IA and their superiors. And they deemed it was a justifiable shooting back in 2002. It happened in 2001, but back in 2002. Fast forward to December 16th, 2020, when I was exonerated, they reopened the investigation. The same unit investigated them. They doubled down. I remember that night. They stuck to their gun. They have to. This is a union. This is what they telling them. You bought into it. You're gonna live by the sword. You're gonna die by the sword. Their day is coming. They will be going to jail for sure, because it's perjury what they did. It's attempted murder what they did. You know, it's corrupt what they did. But it's a process. I am suing the Philadelphia Police Department, the individual cops that are involved in the city of Philadelphia. Absolutely. We're in the process right now. So yeah, it's rolling, and their day is coming.
This is not a profound question, but what was your favorite year in EFM?
Year 3. Year 3, by far.
I think we have time for one more question.
So in the true spirit of EFM, as I listen to you, what is the so what for us? What would you have us do after hearing your story?
Go out and preach the gospel. No. Man, look. I'm no philosopher. I'm just a survivor. And what I've done and what I've been doing and will continue to do is help encourage people. You know, we get stuck in our own bubbles. Life happens, right? I can promise you, if you can hold on and be encouraged through the midst of that, you can get through that, man. I'm telling you, you can. Listen, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna be painful. Some days you're gonna wanna give up and just say, you know what, the hell with it. But keep pushing. And what EFM does, it teaches you to be diplomatic when you're talking with anybody. It takes you out that box. That's the one thing I learned about the EFM. You know, penitentiary, I was having this conversation earlier with someone. Well, so with a couple, Karen and Jenny and Bud, Allen. I can't remember the guy's name. Was it Mike? That was at lunch with us? I'm sorry. Kevin, thank you. Religion, I'm sorry, Kevin. Religion in the penitentiary is very sacred. Whatever you believe in, guys, they dive into that, whether it's Islam, Catholicism, Judaism, Christianity, and then 200 different sects. Whatever it is very gentle. And you got to be very diplomatic when you talking. You're not gonna get through to nobody. So you take your experience, your life experience, and you take EFM's teaching, right? As unapologetic as it is, because EFM is, my goodness, man. And you take those two and you put them together, man, you will be effective. You will be very effective in whatever it is you choose to do with it. And you can just add my talk as the cherry on top. I'm like, hey, Termaine said it, you know, Termaine lived it, you know?
Thank you so much.